This airplane has traveled many miles to arrive at Anglin Lake today. After 54 years, it's returning to its old home, and returning to Jack Greening, who spent many happy hours in the plane with his older brother, George.
My brother was a senior bush pilot, and he flew this particular airplane from about 1944 until it left Prince Albert when the company that owned it, Waite Fisheries at Big River, Saskatchewan, replaced it with a larger, more modern Norseman aircraft. He got up and climbed into this airplane every day, Sundays too. They'd fly freight north and supplies for the cafe, Buffalo Narrows, and stuff for the fish plant at Dory Lake. And I was with him a good number of times. I helped with him. I didn't have a license as an aircraft mechanic, but I had done a lot of work on aircraft during the British Commonwealth Air Training Program. I worked at the airport in Prince Albert. If you look at old pictures of BBQ, she had a cowling with a bump for every cylinder, and it had a fixed pitch propeller. My brother and I worked and put this new engine and that new cowling on this airplane. So when it taxied in today, I could remember the day that I was working on it with my brother.
CFBBQ eventually moved on, and Greening lost track of it. But the 1937 Waco biplane's journey was far from over. It would change hands and find its way to Carl Buck, an aerospace engineer who's worked on NASA projects like the Mars landing.
Ever since I was a teenager, I was infatuated with antique airplanes and biplanes and the round engines on them. And there was just something about the way machines were constructed by hand in those days, and the early aeronautical engineering that's always fascinated me in ways that, say, a warbird doesn't. There's just something a little more primitive about these that has always excited me. After I owned a more modern airplane, I found this one one night when I was surfing on the internet, and it turned up on eBay of all places. I didn't bid on it, but when the auction was all over and nobody bid high enough, I called the owner, and over a period of time, we negotiated a deal.
And we heard the story right after Waite Fisheries got rid of this airplane, that it had crashed and burned in the Yukon territories. We never got that confirmed, but we had just lost track of it. And then she surfaced through a friend of mine who was a flying farmer. He and I had worked together at the airport in Prince Albert in the 40s, and he phoned me one night, and he said, "I just saw a picture of BBQ." He said it came to a seaplane fly-in Menaki, Ontario, with an American registration on it. So immediately I took that American registration and phoned the Federal Aviation Authority, FAA, which is the controlling body of flying in the United States, and they keep all the records, and I got the name of the gentleman who owned it. He salvaged it. It had been abandoned for 12 years on the shore of a lake in northern Ontario. He happened to fly over it and thought it had crashed on the shore of the lake, and he turned and came back and saw that it was just parked up, and there were some trees growing up behind it. That's how long it had been there. And his hobby was restoring old aircraft. And he was a multimillionaire. Money wasn't an obstacle. So in 1973, he had it taken out of the bush and trucked to Owatonna, Minnesota, where he lived. His name was Buzz Kaplan. He restored it and rebuilt it.
The museum had some displays showing pictures of it, big black and white banners or posters that gave me a hint of its history. There were pictures of it on the floats in the summertime. There were pictures that looked very cold in the winter where the airplane was on skis. None of the pictures showed it on wheels in the early days. So that gave me an idea that this airplane had a lot of history.
Buck bought the plane from Buzz Kaplan, a millionaire who had a museum full of antique aircraft, but he had no idea how it had ended up there.
In the fall of the year that I bought the airplane, one nice September Saturday morning, I got a telephone call, and on the other end, I hear a gentleman. He says, "Mr. Buck, my name is Jack Greening." He says, "I'm 78 years old or something like that, and I may not have much longer on this earth, but for that time, I've got a lot to tell you about old BBQ." And I thought, oh, eureka. And so in the years since then, Jack has called me from time to time, told me stories, sent me photographs, and then I got the file from the previous owner, which also included original drawings from the Waco Aircraft Company on how to install the floats. So the floats had been sitting in my hangar for a number of years before I finally figured out how to get them on and where to go to do it.
I started to kind of lean on him a few years ago to come up here and fly up in BBQ. And about a month or a little more ago, he phoned me one day and he said, "Jack, I'm gonna fly BBQ to Anglin Lake." So what you're seeing here today is the culmination of that. I don't know if you noticed my daughter weeping a little bit when Carl was making his final approach across the bush over there in the land, and it just got to her because my brother used to fly it in here to visit us long before we had the business. When we just had a cabin here, my brother would land, and we figured back, and it was about 54 years ago that this airplane had landed and taken off from Anglin Lake the last time.
Jack has scrapbooks with old photographs. He's got a mind full of stories. I have a few pictures and my experiences, and of course we're interested in each other's personal lives. We're going to just have a nice time talking, and I hope to do some flying while I'm here. That's important because this country is just ideal for this airplane.
It's very emotional. I love my brother very dearly. He was 6 years older than I was. And he died in 1990, and Carl said something in our brief conversation since he got here. He said he just felt George's presence. He was thinking about George all the way from Minneapolis to here. So I told him that in my estimation, George was with him because this machine was so big a part of his life. I've got reams of old pictures and things that I want to discuss with Carl about the aircraft, and we've already talked about some of it because the logbooks were evidently lost. I had a terrible time convincing Mr. Kaplan that this was the same airplane. It wasn't until I started telling him intimate things like welding that we had done on the motor mounts when we changed the engine and that I sent him reams of photographs of the aircraft flying in the bush, which is so totally different to the type of flying that it's doing now. I mean, it was a workhorse. Every day it was working, and so I've got all kinds of pictures that were taken when my brother was flying it in the north.
It's something that I enjoy personally, but it means a lot more to me to be able to share this with other people. You can see an airplane like this sitting in a museum or hanging up. That's important that we preserve them. It's also important that we be able to preserve them in the element that they were made to work in, which is on the water and in the air. Because I give a lot of airplane rides in this, and the feel and the sounds and the smells and everything about it, you can't possibly get that by seeing it in a museum or parked in a hangar. There's not a person gets out of this airplane doesn't have a big smile on their face, and the kids draw me pictures and send them in the mail, and with their thank yous. And so it's just, it's extra special for people to come out and see this thing the way it was. And I wish I could do it all the time.
We talk back about the canoe was the machine or the instrument that opened up Canada. It opened up the north. The voyageurs and that came out from the east to trade furs. The airplane did the same for the north. And my brother started working with a firm by the name of Brooks Airways in Prince Albert when he was about 19 years old. You know, when my brother first started flying BBQ, there were still cat trains, Caterpillar tractors pulling long lines of sleighs. So airplanes like this one are historically important to Canada because this is where it started. I often wonder as I fly, where go the airmen when they die? Maybe they don't die at all, but only move to another hall. Often on days when the sky is bright and lofty pinnacles grace the height, I wonder if in the upper air my pilot friends are waiting there. In heaven they'd not do menial things, but course the sky on special wings, ready to help us guys below, guiding us when the big storms blow. Often, when I have judged it wrong and needed help to get along, I wonder if airmen gone before have guided me safely down once more.